Hi guys, we're here to talk to you about, overruling displacement. And just as a introduction, displacement is the amount of liters per engine. So you guys heard 5.7. That's all the amount of liters per engine.
Okay, so we're going to take you to the history of engines, the future, and back to today and the most technologically advanced motors today. So, first off, this is an old engine, probably from the 1990s or 1980s. They call it a big block engine. The whole engine is made out of a big block of iron, so it's insanely heavy. It has single overhead cams, and these basically control the valves which let fuel in and exhaust out of the pistons, and this is where the explosion occurs. And also, these are huge, so this could probably be a 5 or a 6 liter engine, which is not fuel efficient. And basically, if you look back a little further than this, the engines didn't have, they're called injectors, which allow fuel to get into the piston. They actually used carburetors, which are basically what you'd find on a lawnmower. So, now, today, this is a Mercedes engine. It is 4 cylinders. It has an iron a block, which is completely made out of iron, so it's aluminum, which is really lightweight. And this funky tube right here is called a turbocharger. So they've been around for a long time, but turbochargers actually are fans that are spooled by the exhaust, and they push extra pressure into the piston, which causes a bigger explosion. Now, this makes it much more powerful and allows us to make engines smaller because they get more power per the size of the engine. But we could make them as big as the old ones with the new technologies, but that would be too powerful.
And here we see, a very overused car. It's a 2004 Mustang, and the specifics about this picture is a lot of engine power. When the more modifications and the bigger the engine you get, the more fuel it uses. In this picture, it displays that huge engines are pretty much useless, which is unfortunate for a dinosaur like myself. So, to talk about too much power, use too much gas, and nowadays gas prices may be low, but when they go back up, we're all pretty much done for it. And here you see a diesel truck. Now, as you can see, it pollutes our atmosphere and the air that we breathe. Like Alma and Chaya talked about, and Johnny as well, with hybrid vehicles, all of this waste coming from this car becomes eliminated with the further technologies and electric cars and hybrid cars and all of the new stuff being introduced. We can eliminate a lot of CO2 emissions being produced in our atmosphere. And moving into the future.
Okay, so this is a Bmw I8, and basically I wanted to show this. This is an iconic car. Everyone has probably seen it around Saratoga. It looks cool. But we are going to be moving into electric cars in the future for numerous reasons, but one is because, as everyone has talked about, the pollution to our atmosphere, but there's also cons to that because they are still polluting, which Jacob will talk about soon. But electric cars have a lot more performance than engines, because in an engine we have something called a transmission, which tries to keep our car at a certain RPM, which gives it peak power, basically the most efficient and the most powerful at once. But with motors, they do not need a transmission at all because they have consistent power, meaning that if you put your foot down, the power will just keep going to the motors and you will just keep accelerating. There's no need to shift or anything, which is honestly a really nice feeling, and it's really cool.
Not only does it eliminate the need for a transmission, which will make the car lighter, it's also a lot more fuel efficient. As we can see nowadays, Teslas are getting 217 around their average miles per charge, and that's quite a bit compared to some cars today.
But,
however, this is a recent picture. I believe it's from, around when first Teslas were introduced. Now, this can happen for numerous reasons. And if I can name one that's probably the most probable, is if you drive a car insanely, like the Mustang picture that we showed you, eventually the electric motor will heat up to a point where it could, pop. And it explodes, which is, it's not good for the driver. But at the same time, this problem, as you know, battery technologies get more advanced, and as everything, you know, hones in on a specific type of vehicle that we will end up using in the future, this can be eliminated to the point where electric cars will eventually take over and, you know, stomp on all of the other cars.
Now, once I finish the presentation, I'll tell you a little battery story. So, this is the new Acura NSX. You might not know about it, so I'm going to talk about the Prius. But this is just an example of one of the most high-tech hybrid systems out there, because the NSX has one motor per each front wheel, meaning it has two motors and a gasoline engine powering the back. So, the gasoline engine has a turbocharger, and there's something called turbo lag, where the power application from the engine to the wheels takes a while. So they use the motors to actually boost the engine, so once you're driving or something, you have the help of your motors and your gasoline engine, which is really good. And in Teslas, you have a motor and an engine, and this creates a really efficient way to drive, because if you're in the city or at stop signs or stoplights or anything, that uses the most gas to get going from a stoplight. So if we use the motors to do that, then you save a lot of fuel, and then you can use the engine to recharge the batteries, which is a very efficient way to use.
And what he said, he was going to talk about the Prius. The Prius is actually it's very fuel efficient, because as you brake going down a hill, or as you're just rolling along, if you don't press the gas pedal at all, of course the engine's still revving at a very low RPM. It produces a lot of electricity. So if you're braking, it regenerates the electricity into the battery, so you increase your range.
And this is just an example of what you can use today and where technology is going to be going. And we hope you have learned something by our presentation.
Thanks for listening. Questions?